Hello and welcome to On Wisconsin Workforce. I'm Caleb Frostman, your host and Secretary of the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development. I'm here to talk about workforce development, economic development in our great state of Wisconsin. Today on Wisconsin Workforce, I'll be talking with JAMF Chief Strategist Jason Wudi about his technology company founded in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I'll also be talking Manufacturing Month and job numbers with Chief Wisconomist Dennis Winters, National Disability Employment Awareness Month with DWD's Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Administrator Delora Newton, as well as the goals and dreams of 10-year-old Jackson. September was Workforce Development Month, and I traveled throughout the state to hear from organizations about their successful recruitment and retention strategies. One of my last stops was in Eau Claire at JAMF, which provides management solutions for Apple products. We'll begin with JAMF Chief Strategist Jason Wudi. Well, Wudi, appreciate you having us in your shop today at JAMF. And as we were talking about earlier, September is Workforce Development Month, as proclaimed by Governor Tony Evers here in Wisconsin. And just curious, how would you describe JAMF's workforce development strategy?
I would say it's multifaceted is the first part. The first thing, I guess, that I would take a look at is we're committed to the folks that we actually have here and internally. And what that means is it's both a compensation aspect. We talk real quickly about total rewards, or the ability to have people be invested in both what they're doing at work, but also the community that they're in, and how we onboard, how we do technical training, or how we get people into the right roles is a big part of it. One of the things that I would say we're actually very proud of for the way that we do it is what I'm going to call is just internal transfers or internal promotions. And just chatting with the team a little bit earlier today as we looked at it, we have had in the Eau Claire facility about 275 employees. We've had about 60 ads from the outside, but inside of filling those roles, we've actually had over 100 transitions of people who are internal, meaning when we post a job, our people inside are being encouraged and hopefully being trained to be able to be ready for that job. And so we're seeing double the amount of internal mobility as we would from the outside. And we're also getting great candidates from the outside to come in and start feeding into that system. The idea that we're there is also looking for people, one thing being a software company in the space that we're in, there's not outside experts who come just homegrown. And so we end up training, but there's also an aspect of it that we get to train in an area, in an industry, and in an environment where you have great cost of living, but you also have a global impact. And so our people are able to say, I can see the value of the work that I'm doing and how it actually spreads far beyond the walls of our building or even the community that we're directly in. And I'm actually pretty proud of the folks that we've had that I'll say start here in the Midwest that have also carried the torch as we've continued to expand globally. Have spearheaded efforts across the nation as well as across the globe when we've opened up or expanded. And so that's the positive part of being in a growth environment as you continue to have opportunities, and we can continue to promote our people internally to help fill in and kind of move along with JAMF.
That's great. What would you say are your biggest obstacles or challenges to finding the quality workers that JAMF needs to maintain, or maybe even better yet, grow your operations here in Eau Claire?
I would say that there's a couple of things that really kind of peak in my head. Some of it is just the ability to find people who are in the market that are ready to look, or how do we actually become known to them. In other places or other opportunities that would be out there, Minneapolis is a market that we're in. We also have offices there. It's just a much larger marketplace, if you will, and there is more of an expectation of some of that mobility. But getting in front of the right people at the right time with the opportunities and kind of making yourselves known has been one of the challenges for the opportunities that JAMF represents. I think there's sometimes a perception that, well, JAMF software company, you got to be technical in mind. And while we look for people inside of those roles, there's actually a pretty good range of skill set that are necessary to run a global operation. And the idea that we have to train on board and actually continue to support those people in all roles. But how do we get that message out if we have a perception that's there? I would say that the second aspect of it is finding folks who have the relevant customer experience or that customer-centric mindset. So we're not necessarily looking for just one particular profile, but everyone who comes in has to have that idea of we're going to do the right thing for the customer in our particular culture, as well as have intellectual curiosity about how we're going to continue to learn. A big part of our success is that empowerment and transparency into our workforce, but that also leaves an obligation for the employee to jump in and engage and continue to try to move forward. Challenges, I would say it's the same as many other folks would have. How do we maintain our cost of living, quality of life, housing, healthcare, right? All of the other things that any other provider or vendor or software company that would be out there anywhere else in the U.S. is worried about. Here in Eau Claire, we also have a big pull on what are our people doing when they're outside of the workplace. Is the engagement with the community, with whether that is your outside group or your particular creative interests, hobbies, outdoors activities, and are those things accessible? As well as, then I'll couple that with, are we a place that actually encourages the diversity that we look for to support a global workforce? And the ability to say you can bring your whole self to work, and we can be a place where you can do that in the office is one thing, but also making sure that the community and the things that surround us also support all of the people who are our coworkers is a big part of that story. Does that make sense?
It does. That's a really robust answer, but I think the culture seems to be working. You guys have a pretty big group of folks that seem to be really engaged here, so yeah, it does. That's great.
And a big part of that actually is just the types of folks that are here continuing to be engaged, and the fact that they don't just view themselves as part of JAMF while they're here. They're proud of what we do and how they carried that back into the rest of the community, and a lot of good coworkers that we have walking around this place.
That's great. That's awesome. And speaking of good coworkers, how does JAMF, or how do you market these opportunities to young techies that might justifiably link software and technology to jobs in Silicon Valley? How do you market yourself to those folks?
First is that we actually have access to and are working in a space that has a lot of mind share with that. So our relationship in the marketplace as it relates to Apple, the types of technologies we're working with, and some of the trends that we're seeing in our business are closely aligned with what some of those trends are. And so we get an opportunity to be on the front lines and really see what's happening inside of that space. But we get to do it from our environment where cost of living and I'll say some of the churn that you might have to deal with when we're here in the Midwest is actually a lot more comfortable. I would actually challenge a little bit just to say that as we look at it, it's not just about young necessarily either. We're actually looking for those folks who they might be at any stage of their career or their journey, but if they have the intellectual curiosity to want to come in and actually tackle some interesting problems or kind of work through that training process to jump in where we're at, we're more looking for the capability and the capacity than we are for a particular person who's already kind of ready-made to fit that mold. And while there's many great training and career experience opportunities, we have a unique culture. I think every organization has a unique culture, and it takes time to be able to fit into that. But finding those folks who, again, it comes back to that curiosity and engagement with the workplace across the spectrum is really a big part of it. Also having the ability to say, hey, we can transfer what we do here, and it can lead to global opportunity. So a great example of our engaged team is that when we meet this coming spring, we actually have an event we call Sub-Zero, where the entire global workforce gets together. Our product engineering and cloud and delivery resources are actually all going to the Katowice, Poland office.
Wow.
And so all of the folks from Eau Claire are jumping along with our Minneapolis and our other regional folks, which are going to travel over where we have another one of our tech hubs. Our customer service and experience folks are going to be here in Eau Claire. We have a team in Minneapolis that'll be there, and we're all heading over to Poland. Great example of somebody who's been here. I have a coworker we were discussing at lunch, has a passport, has never used it. And so their first opportunity to travel and see some additional parts of the world through their work travel. And we get an opportunity to interact with a lot of those people and see a lot of both what makes us different cultures, different background, different languages as we learn to adapt here. But we also learn what makes us the same, and that at the end, the ability to have passion for customer success is really more the common driver. And so just as stories or examples like that where we can stretch far beyond the walls of our facility kind of give some of those folks those opportunities.
That's pretty cool. Not many folks I know are taking their entire staff to Poland, so good for you guys. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah,
that's great.
It's one that we still have a very, about 1,100 employees, but it's still a very, we try and keep it as small as we can and have that very, I'll say, wide open transparency of what's going on, as well as the engagement with coworkers, with the organization, with the success that we're trying to have. And it's hard to replace interpersonal or face-to-face time.
I believe that. No, it's great. Well, you touched on it a little bit as far as the cost of living here in the Midwest, but Wisconsin and the Midwest really aren't well known for our tech sectors yet. But JAMF is really doing great things both in Wisconsin. You mentioned Minnesota. What are some of the things that you attribute for your company's success here in this region?
So first one I'll go back to is actually some of the roots of JAMF and some of the experiences that we had actually came from some of the secondary education institutions that are here. University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, CVTC, UW Stout, and a number of places where we had people engaged and exposed to both their craft at those institutions as well as the talent that we were able to engage with on some really, really great faculty who guided a number of those students. And so we had an opportunity and access to a lot of experiences through an organic fashion with relationships that actually had started there, and I believe that continues today. Our ability to tap into what I'm going to say is a very capable, intelligent, high-tech workforce, both on the developing side as well as, like you said, evolving. There's actually a lot of tech here, specifically even in the Chippewa Valley. There's a legacy going all the way back to everything from Seymour Cray and what had gone on. And if you bring forward the way I think technology has changed is, while JAMF might be seen as a pure tech vendor, you look at some other employers who are in the area who, just by the nature of both our economy and the way that tech is delivered, have had to become very tech-centered. And so you look at the healthcare institutions that are here and what their transition to electronic medical records have been. You even look at the way that Menards is an employer here. It's more likely that I search for something on my mobile app for Menards today than I would have ever thought that would have been possible a handful of years ago. And so there's this booming technology delivery that's inside many of these organizations. If you flip over and see actually what's going on inside the institution. My analogous kind of representation of that is when JAMF started in supporting the Apple ecosystem. Apple was there in most organizations, just happened to be locked in the creative department, maybe in advertising, maybe in marketing. And I think you're starting to see it's not any different when you start to look at it and you say there is a technology or a high-tech component to almost every one of the vendors who's competing in today's workforce. It just happens to be inside of their org with a particular delivery. And we're seeing the benefits of that as more of those jobs become known and people continue to move into that space. More and more folks in the market and the community are aware and able to take advantage of, hopefully, a positive career mobility.
Nice. Well, great. And I would ask you also, what's the biggest thing that keeps you up at night that relate to the obstacles of JAMF, and what are some of the things that the state could potentially be helpful in overcoming those obstacles?
Two good questions. I'm going to see if I can link them together. I would say the number one thing that keeps me up in my role as JAMF is positioned is just the way that customer information, customer data, and kind of the trend of making sure that when we are trusted as a software vendor of one of many, that we're able to protect that data and make sure that the integrity of what the customers have entrusted us with, as well as the certainty that we're doing the right thing with it. And I think that we're just seeing that as an evolving trend over the entirety of the industry is something that we're certainly keenly aware of and trying to make sure that we stay on the front, in front of, as well as on the right side of when history writes all of this down on the other side. And so when you look at all of the things that come along with that around information security, policies, practice, and kind of the maturing overall, I would say those are the things that really get me, I wouldn't say concerned, but really get me focused on what we're trying to do with the products that we deliver to serve our customers. But then the second thing that comes immediately behind that is I switch from what our customer value is, which is typically where I go, is back to what's good for our employees, what's good for JAMF. And the ability to actually serve those customers comes entirely from my group of coworkers. And so you can call it quality of life, you can call it ability to access the resources they need to live their best lives, but even the types of challenges that we're all dealing with as it relates to making sure that bills get paid, that healthcare insurance is available, that the affordable housing is there, and everything that comes along with that spectrum is actually what is a JAMF concern. And so how can the state help? So if I switch to that perspective, I would say a couple of things that come into mind. The first is continuing to support the development of the institutions and the programs that have helped continue to develop our Wisconsin talent, and I hope that we're part of the story of there's an opportunity for those folks to stay in Wisconsin and continue to thrive. But that's CVTC for specific skills, UWC, UW Stout, things of that sort that we talked about. The second that I would say, as somebody who is still in a rapid growth software company, is trying to understand what's all available to us from a workforce development perspective. I know that's one of the things that they get talked about, and actually we have an active Chamber of Commerce here in Eau Claire and a number of other folks. There's a fair number of resources focused on some portion of workforce development, but where's the clearinghouse or the understanding of, if I'm looking for these things, either can I engage my workforce or can I engage with that institution to figure out how I can be better and work through it, is still a part that's elusive to me from the chair that I sit in. And so if I had to make it in a simple ask, where is the yellow pages of workforce development and how does that all come together? And then the other one that I'll look at is just the general infrastructure that supports the coworker. I don't expect, as an organization or as a business, we have to make sure that we're focused on taking care of our employees, but there's infrastructure and resources that need to continue to be available. So healthy community government process that actually is aware of and kind of on top of the trends that are here is actually a big part of that for us, and how do we engage. And there's many viewpoints about how all of that can be done, but at least making sure that dialogue is focused back on the individual and making it about the people.
That's great. Anything else that you'd want us to hear before we take off and head back to Madison?
Honestly, it's I'm glad that everybody gets a chance to take a little bit of a look and maybe shine a spotlight on what's going on here in the Chippewa Valley. I hope that JAMF continues to be a member in that community and is continuing to help grow. But there is actually some tremendous organizations who are putting resources in as well, and I think we're kind of all in the same boat. And I'm just glad that everybody got a chance to take a look or spend a little time here.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, we traveled the state over the last month, kind of hearing best practices from some high-performing employers, and so we're really excited to come check out JAMF today. And
thank you guys.
Thanks, Wudi. Next up, I'm joined by Dennis Winters, our Chief Wisconomist here at DWD, to discuss Manufacturing Month and August's job numbers. What are our statewide jobs numbers looking like this month? Anything of note we should pay attention to?
Well, the August numbers came in weaker than we'd hoped, with total non-farm job decreasing by about 3,500 jobs over the month. Most of that decline though was in a 2,500 jobs drop in local government jobs. So that can be a number of things, and depending on when the payrolls hit, when they take the survey, and then a lot of summer help they have around. So, but we still saw gains in construction and professional services and trade. Manufacturing numbers were down a bit, 700 jobs over the month, but that's kind of indicative of what we're seeing in the overall manufacturing sector, both in the upper Midwest and through the country. And more than that, more than all that drop was in the durable goods sector. So we had some gains in the non-durables again. And
are there any communities or counties in particular that are seeing statistically significant changes this time around?
Well, yeah. I mean, as we look at unemployment numbers through, say, the counties and the municipalities through the state, they're all experiencing relatively low unemployment rates. All but one, is below 6% unemployment rate, which are, this is in contrast to the double-digit rates we saw, through the last recession. And then there's well over half, I think, something like 45 out of the 72 counties are below 3.5%. And it just ticks down. You've got 28, that are 3% or lower, and then Dane County and Iowa County usually at the bottom at 2.5%. And Fitchburg, I think, the city of Fitchburg takes the low number for 2.4%. Yeah, we're down at numbers that are historical lows and have been for a little while, and we're just kind of bouncing around the bottom at this point.
Well, October is manufacturing month here in Wisconsin, and it's a pretty significant part of our economy. What can you tell us about the many facets of manufacturing here in Wisconsin, and what do we make the most of here?
Well, as you know, Wisconsin is the leading manufacturing state in the country, and it's second only to Indiana in the concentration of manufacturing work. Wisconsin employs a little over 470,000 people in manufacturing. That's about 16% of the workforce. The U.S. average is about 9%. We rate up there, and we're doing well. And Wisconsin's a leader in food processing and paper converting and electric machinery and production machinery. Some of those are big exports that we have. And then we've got clusters in plastics and wood products. And a lot of those get exported too. We're like a lot of the upper Midwest states, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana. We're a heavy manufacturing state.
Nationally, it's been reported in the recent weeks that the manufacturing sector has contracted to levels not seen since the Great Recession. Here in Wisconsin, how do companies steel themselves against this kind of volatility?
Yeah, a number of manufacturing indicators are signaling contraction in the industry. We see that again nationally, internationally for a lot of it too. And Wisconsin manufacturing jobs are off their highs, but we're still 50,000 more manufacturing jobs in the state now than there was during the recession. But the big unknown still is trade policy. So it's the main thing that's, what I say, seizing up, corporate decisions on investment opportunities, either for expansion or new technology or further marketing things too. Just the uncertainty that's going around on the trade policy. We're starting to see some of the ramifications of the United Auto Workers strike on GM. So that's starting to ripple out into their supply chains all over the country. And I know some folks in Georgia and other places that they're cutting back their production lines because they're suppliers to suppliers maybe for the industry. For Wisconsin manufacturers, it's you just got to kind of be prudent and agile in the current situation. It's a tough situation to manage. It's difficult to be confident in what's in the store over the next few months. Kind of a hard nut right now.
In addition to October being manufacturing month, it is also National Disability Employment Awareness Month, also known as NDEAM. What can you tell us about the number of people in Wisconsin's workforce with a disability?
Well, the census statistics show about 135,000 those employed in Wisconsin are people with a disability. So that's about 4.8% of the workers in stats for 2018. And in 2010, it was about 4.4%. On that account, I'd say we're making progress. We know employing the disabled is one prong of helping to solve the worker quantity challenge we've got in the state.
Yeah, I think as we travel around the state and talk to employers who are doing well as far as attraction and retention, a lot of them have taken a more inclusive approach, and that very often includes folks with disabilities. Looking at the long-term trajectory of folks with disabilities being employed, is Wisconsin improving? Are we seeing an upward trend in the number of folks being employed with disabilities?
Well, yeah, we are in numbers.
Okay.
And we are in the share of the total employment picture. So, and as you know, we've got programs within the department to try to attract those people and get them trained up for the myriad of jobs that are out there for them.
Awesome. Well, Dennis, we always appreciate your strong insight on the economic numbers here in Wisconsin. Any parting thoughts for us today?
No, I just like the fact that we're adding jobs year over year, and the unemployment rate's down at historic lows, and or near that. And in fact, just today the U.S. unemployment rate came out for September at 3.5%. So I'm not quite sure when you were born, but I think that number, we haven't seen a number that low since before that blessed event. So.
I think that's right. I think I saw a release from you like maybe 1965. Sir, Abbey Road, you said?
Abbey Road, since September of 69.
Oh, 69, okay.
Yeah.
So that's quite a while ago. Yeah, that was 15 years before I was here on Earth. But great times from what I understand. And so, well, that's great. Well, thanks, Dennis, very much. We appreciate you being on the podcast this month.
Sure.
Thank you. I'm joined by Delora Newton, Administrator of the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation here at DWD. Delora, welcome to the show. October is National Disability Employment Awareness Month, also known as NDEAM, and throughout the month, DWD is recognizing companies that have committed to hiring and employing individuals with disabilities. Tell the audience, Delora, what are some of the benefits of hiring and employing individuals with disabilities?
Well, first of all, they have the talent to do the job, so why not hire them? There's three main reasons. One, diversity. It's adding diversity to the workforce. You can't go wrong with that. It means a lot to people, especially millennials and the younger generations. They look for diversity in the workforce when they're looking for an employer. Loyalty. these employees are loyal because they really love that somebody hired them. They have great attendance records. Their attendance records meet or excel those of other employees. And believe it or not, they actually don't get hurt on the job either. Their frequency of getting injured on the job is less than others. And then finally, there's an improvement to the culture of the workplace. We've had numerous employers tell us that hiring people with disabilities, the positivity that they bring because they're excited to come to work every day, it's infectious, and it's really boosted the overall morale of all their staff.
Well, that's great. As we've traveled the state and talked to folks, I mentioned this with Dennis earlier, just that the employers that do employ folks with disabilities are some of the best champions for DVR programs and employing folks in an inclusive and diverse manner. So that's excellent to hear. Can you provide a couple of recent examples of maybe how DVR has helped connect an individual with a disability to employment?
Sure. So we had a DVR job seeker with schizophrenia recently let us know that he felt we were the only government agency that was able to help him. We helped him pay for college, so now he has a job with family supporting wages, and he's really able to help his family out, and that means the world to him. Another example, we had a 2019 Project Search graduate who did a tour at a local laboratory. She was hired on the spot because the staff and the leadership was so impressed with her, and her mom was waiting out in the lobby, and we understand that when she came out there were tears of joy, and it was just like being at American Idol when they get the golden ticket. So those are just a couple of the very heartwarming stories in a way that we've made a difference.
Oh, that's awesome. Very cool. And I was very privileged to attend, I think, close to a dozen Project Search graduations, and it really is moving to see these students and their families and their instructors and their advocates become more economically independent and build skills and build confidence. It's really spectacular. Now, we've heard a lot over the last few months and, frankly, the last few years about the worker shortage in Wisconsin and throughout the country. From your perspective, why is it so important to include the hiring of individuals with disabilities as part of any company's workforce strategy?
Well, part of it is, we'll start with, you mentioned NDEAM at the beginning, and so this being NDEAM month, this year's theme is the right talent right now. So I think that really speaks to what this question is. So it's important for people to know that the talents of DVR job seekers, they range from entry-level work to highly skilled, CEOs, doctors, lawyers. It's the whole gamut. People have all kinds of talents. So in addition to the employee loyalty, the improved workplace culture that I talked about before, 18% of the population has a disability. And any one of us in our lifetime could develop a disability by either getting sick or having an accident. So it's a growing population. That group has right now $175 billion in discretionary spending every year, in discretionary spending power. So it's a very powerful group of individuals who have money to spend. And so when companies hire people with disabilities, the consumers, they like to look and see, who are you hiring? And if you hire people who look like me, I'm more apt to spend my money with you.
This is true. Those are great reasons to take part in a diverse and inclusive workforce recruitment strategy. Here in Madison, we just recently held the World Dairy Expo, and as I'm sure you are very well aware, farming can be a dangerous career. And with that being said, I'm sure DVR has assisted a lot of farmers either get into farming or remain in farming. So we'd be curious to hear what DVR can do to help a farmer remain employed in an agricultural field after becoming disabled.
Yeah, that's a great question. We can develop a plan with the farmers. It's an individualized plan that meets, what their particular disability is and what they need. And that plan could include the necessary accommodations so that they could continue farming. So some examples of things that we have helped farmers with is we have purchased remote control gates so they don't have to get off their tractor or their skid steer to go open the gate. We could do adaptive controls on the tractor or skid steer if they can't use their feet. We've purchased steps for tractors to make it easier to get in and out, automatic feeding carts to make it easier to feed, and then calf carts to make it more easy to move the calves so the farmer doesn't have to physically lift them and walk with them.
Oh, very cool. It's some really creative accommodations to help folks stay in their preferred industry and be successful. That's excellent. This is kind of a fun part of the podcast. Well, it's all fun. The whole thing is fun all the time. But as you know, on every episode of On Wisconsin Workforce, we have a young individual on the show tell us what they'd like to be when they grow up. And you being a young individual, of course, let me ask you, when you were young, what is it that you wanted to be when you grew up and why?
That's a great question. I wanted to be a police officer or a social worker. And I liked those professions because I felt that they were professions that I could help people. And so I'm not a counselor, I'm not a social worker, but I think being DVR administrator, I get to work with a lot of people in it's helping them get jobs. It's not social work, but it's helping them get the skills and education and work experience that they need, that they can go out and get a job and become financially independent or maintain their financial independence. So it's, probably about as close to social work as you can get without being a social worker.
Oh, that's excellent. Well, we're glad you're here. I'm sure you've been a great social worker, a great police officer, but you're a great division administrator. So thanks for being on the show today. We appreciate it greatly, and enjoy the weekend.
Yeah, thanks. You too.
Thanks, Delora.
All right, bye.
Finally, I'll be talking to 10-year-old Jackson, and he will be telling us what he wants to be when he grows up. Okay, and what do you like to do for fun?
Hockey and Rubik's Cubes.
Oh, are you good at Rubik's Cubes?
Yeah.
What's the fastest you've ever solved one?
Well, I've solved the pyramids in, I think it was 20 seconds.
Whoa, that's serious. And what do you play in hockey? Which position?
Either center or defense.
Okay, that's pretty serious. What number are you?
99.
Ooh, that's a good number. It's a tough guy number. I like that.
Thanks.
Awesome. Now, what do you think you want to be when you grow up?
NHL player, or I want to build things.
Okay. If you were to build things, do you think like houses or...
big buildings.
Big buildings. Okay, that's really cool.
Wudi.
Sure, that'd be kind of fun. Build a big office building. What do you think those people do that build buildings on a daily basis? What do you think their daily tasks are? What are some of the things that they're doing when they go to work?
Blueprints, scheduling everything, getting the cement here on time and stuff like that.
That's impressive. You know all that already, because that's really important stuff. Logistics and getting the timing right and having all the supplies and the plans. Do you think you'd have to go to school or get some training to do that? Yeah.
Sadly, you have to go to school.
Yeah, well, school's fun, man. All the cool kids go to school. No. Well, that's awesome. And what, so in addition to reading blueprints, what other kind of training do you think you would need to be a successful construction manager or builder?
Physics and logic. Well, a lot of physics, because you need to have a strong base, steady sides for the building, and you need to know a lot about the structure before you build it. You can't just build it like Legos. Oh
yeah, that's really smart. You know a lot about this. Do you have a builder in your family, or
my dad was a construction worker when he started, but that's basically it.
Yeah, well, it's really impressive you know about that, because that's absolutely true. You have to have a good understanding of physics to know how the buildings are going to be supported, and they're going to resist the wind and resist the weather, and that's really, really smart. So in addition to those potential schoolings and trainings, what kind of skills do you think successful builders possess? What are some of the skill sets that they have that make them good at building things?
You have to know what you're going to do before you do it, and you have to have the right people to do it. And you have to have experience before you build big structures. You have to start small and work your way up.
Yeah, that all sounds really good. I think being a planner, having good teamwork, and then learning from your experiences would really set you up to be a strong, successful builder. That's awesome. Well, Jackson, thanks for coming in and being a part of this day. We appreciate you coming in. Did you get enough cake and ice cream?
Yeah.
Yeah, what did you get, the Superman or the caramel one?
Superman.
Oh, of course. That sounds really good. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming in today. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of On Wisconsin Workforce. If you want to learn more about the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development, check out our website at www.dwd.wisconsin.gov. You can also follow us on Facebook or LinkedIn by searching for the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development, and you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at WI Workforce. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the show. I'm Secretary Caleb Frostman, and this is On Wisconsin Workforce.